What's up guys, my name is Ace, and believe it or not, we've got a Warzone video on this channel. And today, I wanted to talk about the return of Verdansk. It is coming quite soon, and I thought it would be fitting to share my very first gameplay ever on Warzone. This is the first time I ever dropped into Warzone. And the main topic I wanted to discuss here is, will Verdansk be able to save Warzone? Because lately it seems like Warzone's really been dropping off in popularity. And based on some leaks and rumors at least, it appears that the return of Verdansk is meant to be that Hail Mary to try to save Warzone and bring people back. And according to a prominent leaker in the community, the Ghost of Hope, if Verdansk fails to retain players, there's a chance there will be no Warzone 3 down the road. So this could genuinely be a do or die situation for Warzone. And I'll just say right up front, do I think Verdansk itself will save Warzone? No, probably not. I think it depends on a lot of factors outside of the map itself. I do think with the return of Warzone, it's going to be bringing a ton of players back that have fallen off Warzone over the years, myself included. I mean, it's been years since I even played Warzone. I don't cover it on this channel anymore, and yet here I am with a Warzone video talking about Warzone, and that's 100% due to the fact that Verdansk is coming back. So I do think there will absolutely be a spike in player count. There's going to be a ton of people coming back, but it's keeping those players around that's going to be the main challenge. And I do want to dive deeper into that in a little bit, but first I just want to answer the question why I don't feel the map itself will be enough. And the first general part of this is a huge part of the success of Warzone in the beginning was it was something very new and unique. It was the first free-to-play Call of Duty Battle Royale. While Blackout did exist previously, Warzone really pushed things to the next level in a lot of areas. I think it was a lot more in-depth. There was a lot more to it than Blackout. Also, it has to be said, the timing of Warzone worked out flawlessly with COVID. There were a lot of people locked indoors with a ton of free time on their hands, and therefore tons of people got really heavily invested in Warzone early on, simply because they had nothing else better to do. It also offered a way to socialize with people while you were locked indoors throughout COVID. And then another big point to mention here that applies to basically any new game, a big part of the magic early on, a big part of what made Warzone so fun in the really early days was simply the fact that nobody knew what they were doing. Everybody was sort of figuring things out, as you can see in the gameplay in the background. Like I said, this was literally my first time ever dropping into Warzone, and you can see I'm totally clueless just running around trying to figure things out. Whereas now, it can be really hard to get into Warzone because there are people that have been playing Warzone like it's their job or literally as their job for the past 5 years now. So they've mastered every single detail of the game, and there's just no room for error if you play against those people. And those are all areas that can't be recaptured by simply bringing back the original map. Additionally, outside of that, a big part of the success wasn't to do necessarily with the map itself, it was also the mechanics of the time. And a lot of things have changed with Warzone since then. Like, I believe we no longer have floating loot. Sorry if I'm wrong about anything talking about how Warzone is now, because like I said, I haven't played it in years, but I have seen some video clips here or there. But I'm pretty sure there's still no floating loot, although the rumors are that's going to be returning with Verdansk, so that's a good thing. Also, a big part of Verdansk, especially early on, is vehicles played in heavily, and positioning was a lot more important because we didn't have those balloon things that you could zip line up and then just parachute wherever you wanted on the map, or maybe not wherever you wanted, but you could go long distances. You could also parachute up and just like land on top of an enemy player or squad. And you couldn't do that in the early days of Verdansk, so the entire gameplay flow was totally different. It was much more about positioning and making sure you were planning out your movements well in advance because you couldn't just zip around like crazy. Also, one-shot snipers, that was a big part of the gameplay back then, and I'm pretty sure we don't have one-shot snipers from what I remember. Although maybe there are some exceptions there, maybe there's some way to get a one-shot sniper, but back in the early days, one-shot sniping was quite important to the gameplay flow. Also back then, there weren't nearly as many ways of respawning. There was no omni movement. All we had was slide cancel. And like I said, early on, there weren't very many people that knew about slide canceling. Whereas today, even the average player is going to be slide canceling quite a bit. So it's not just the map that made things special back then. It was also the mechanics. And we'll have to wait to see how many mechanics they're going to be bringing back and how true they're going to be staying to that. Because I suspect we will be seeing a lot of the modern mechanics still present while playing on Verdansk. And that may be a downside. Another huge factor here is cheating. In the early days of Verdansk, I definitely remember running into cheaters from time to time. They were there, but it wasn't nearly as widespread from what I remember compared to now. I think this is one of the areas where when Warzone was brand new, it was harder to develop cheats for it because it was brand new, like the engine itself was quite new. Also, very early on, the game was still very much so dominated by console overall. And from what I remember, Warzone kind of marked the beginning of the transition for many players to move from console to PC because there were so many benefits to playing Warzone on PC. But in the really early days, it was still very much a console game, and therefore at the time, the market for cheating was a lot smaller. And I do think that probably contributed to a degree as well. And then finally, one last point that I wanted to make here when it comes to my opinion on why Verdansk won't necessarily just save Warzone on its own. This is the fact that Verdansk and Warzone itself was far from perfect in the early days. And I think a lot of people are looking back with rose-tinted glasses and they forget the frustrating things and the issues that took place with that map and that game. So I do suspect for many people, they're going to be overhyping things in their head leading up to Verdansk. They're going to be remembering all the really good times, not so much the bad times that they had back in the day. And therefore, I think many are going to be setting unrealistic expectations for what this is going to do to the game as a whole. But that is just a theory that I've got. We'll have to wait to see how that plays out. At the end of the day, like I said, I do think Verdansk is going to be bringing a lot of players back, but retaining those players might be difficult. So what do I feel they have to do to retain those players beyond that initial height? Well, at least coming from the perspective of one of those players that has fallen off years ago, I think there's a few key things they really need to do. The first big one is there needs to be a huge anti-cheat push leading up to and for the Season 3 update. I've been noticing they have been taking more legal action and sending cease and desist to various cheat developers, so they have been shutting some of them down. They got to keep up with that, obviously. The kernel level driver, I hope they continue to have updates for that as well. Basically, for that launch window of Verdansk, they really need to make sure cheating is kept at least somewhat in check. Because if returning players like myself come back and run into a cheater right away, it's going to be pretty easy for us to just be like, no, this game still sucks, we're out, and we'll never come back again. Also, kind of referring back to one of the points I was just talking about, I hope with the relaunch of Verdansk, they're really going to be dialing back a lot of the mechanics as well. Like we said, we saw a leak or rumor for floating loot. I don't think that's been officially confirmed at this point, but it seems likely. That's a big thing. But I hope we see it with other areas as well. Like I hope one-shot snipers return. I hope we don't have those redeploy balloons. Is that what they're called? I think they're called redeploy balloons, the ones that allow you to zip line up and then just parachute all over the place. I hope we see a big focus on vehicles again, because if they don't, it's really not going to feel like the original Verdansk at all. Also, one big fear that I have when it comes to returning players, especially for players that haven't played Black Ops 6, like they haven't been playing any Call of Duty, what is that experience going to look like when they get back into the game and they have nothing unlocked or leveled up, playing against people that have been playing Warzone and have all of the meta guns and setups ready to go? Now, I do hope this is something they do something to try to address, and I thought of a couple different options here. The first option could be just give us a few free bundles for everybody and make those bundles the meta guns with at least near meta attachments. That would just help level the playing field a little bit right out of the gate so that those returning players aren't at nearly as much of a disadvantage. Alternatively, they could just make the Season 3 guns, which are returning original Warzone guns, so we got like the AMAX, the Kilo, and the HDR, just balance those in a way where they become the meta guns, and that way everybody's starting at level 1 with all of those new guns, including returning players, and everyone can just level those at the same time. Either way, I hope this is an area that they don't overlook, because again, I think the big challenge is retaining those returning players. And if they come into the game immediately feeling like they're at such a massive equipment disadvantage, then that could immediately push a lot of those players back away from the game. Now, one final thing that I think would go a long way to retaining those players long term and also just turning Warzone around in general, although this one I'll admit is just big wishful thinking at this point, I think some serious server and or matchmaking improvements could go a long way here. It seems the servers haven't been improved at all since the launch of Warzone, as far as I can tell at least. They're still running at a very low tick rate for Warzone specifically. And even outside of that, I follow a lot of people that play Warzone on Twitter, and I'm constantly seeing clips and complaints about stuttering and packet loss and really high ping values when they're clearly capable of getting a much lower ping. So I think that's just another area where making improvements to that I think are necessary long term if they really want to turn things around in Warzone. And those are just the primary things I can think of that I hope they're really keeping in mind if this really is a make or break moment for Warzone. Like I said, I'm definitely looking forward to the return of Verdansk and hopefully the return of a more traditional Warzone experience in general. And I'm definitely feeling at least a little bit excited. This is the first time Warzone has been able to capture even the slightest amount of interest from me in years at this point. However, I'm unfortunately a bit doubtful that it's going to be enough to bring me back long term. I see myself probably getting into this, streaming it once or twice, playing it a little bit, and and then probably just remembering that I'm burnt out on battle royales in general, and there's really nothing they could do to bring me back long term. That may be the case for me, and that's fine if that is the case. Time will tell. I'm definitely going to go in with an open mind and give it a shot. And who knows, maybe I'll be totally wrong here, and this will mark my return to Warzone, and maybe I'll be getting back to making Warzone content here on the channel. We'll have to wait to see how that one plays out, though. And with that, this is where I'm curious to hear from you guys in those comments down below. What are your general thoughts on the return of Verdansk to Warzone? Do you guys think that this has the potential to save Warzone and really turn things around? Or not so much? You guys think this isn't going to work out too well for them long term? Just let me know down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated. And don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.